My story in Japan starts like a lot of foreigner stories do here. I was an English teacher. Different than a lot of foreigners. I actually really enjoyed it. Both my mom and dad were educators. So from there, my path changed a bit when I got into a Japanese company that runs what's called an edutainment theme park. I kind of worked my way up pretty quickly to being the first foreign director there, and saw just how fucked up management can be. And started to get curious. It's just like, why is it like this? Why do people treat each other this way? How can it be done differently?
All right. So, hey Cory, how are you?
Yeah, good, Ranvir. How are you doing?
I'm good. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah,
How's
thanks.
everything been?
Thanks. Feels fun to be welcome to the podcast in my space. So
Yes, exactly.
welcome to my office in Japan and to your podcast.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we are here in Minakami, Japan. A very beautiful city. I've loved my time here so far.
Yeah.
So, first of all, let's just talk a bit about you. So tell perhaps the audience a bit about you and, why you're here in Minakami and what you do.
Sure. So I'm American by birth, but I've been in Japan since 1999. And I've lived more than half my life outside of the US now. And came here kind of on a whim. And Japan has a way of being kind of sticky. It's a really easy place to live.
Yeah.
And I have a family here now. I'm married to a Japanese woman. We have 2 teenage boys. And we've lived out in this mountain area. So Minakami is a kind of a mountain town about 1 hour outside of Tokyo by bullet train.
Mm-hmm.
We've been out here for about 6 years. And I can say that it's probably the best place that I've lived in my life. And the place that I've felt most at home at since I was a kid in the house that I grew up in. So It's really cool and really wild to be like on the other side of the planet from where I grew up but to have such a sense of home in the community here.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty important, because where you feel a bit centered and you feel a bit welcome, you're able to think your best, be your best, and feel your best. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I would also say that it's increasingly rare for people to have a real sense of home in the place that they live in. There's often practical reasons why people are living there that make a lot of sense, but it doesn't necessarily equate to like feeling at home there. So it feels like a real privilege to have landed in a place like that also.
Awesome. And so now that we're here in Minakami, what is it that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a leadership and executive coach. I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years now. And probably the kind of different take on the way that I do it from a lot of coaches out there is that I incorporate the stuff that I love into the work, which means outdoor and adventure work. So the majority of my work is pretty recognizable in terms of how coaches work. I spend time in sessions with people one-on-one. I actually do most of my work by phone, not by video, because I prefer not to be on video. But as part of the work, I also bring people out here to Minakami, and they experience a 3-day, what I call a wilderness visioning retreat, where they get to come and kind of set what their outcomes for the work will be, what their goals will be in the next 6 to 12 months. They stay at a beautiful glamping venue here. We do some outdoor activity that's kind of customized to where they're at in their own process. And I also so the majority of my work is with individual leadership clients, but I also work a bit with groups and teams doing things like offsites or group or team retreats.
And you said that you've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get into this?
So my story in Japan starts like a lot of foreigner stories do here. I was an English teacher. I did that for a while, and probably what's different than a lot of foreigners, I actually really enjoyed it. Really, I come from
It's the same in Thailand as well. They all come as English teachers or something to do with English language. But go on.
I was just going to say, like, my family is educators. Both my mom and dad were educators. So I really enjoyed the work. Got into a bit of recruiting teachers, and then I moved into actual executive recruitment, which is the other thing most foreigners do here. But from there, my path changed a bit when I got into a Japanese company that runs what's called an edutainment theme park called Kidzania. I believe there's one in Bangkok.
Yeah, there is
well.
actually. Yeah.
So the one in Tokyo was the first one globally outside of the Mexico headquarters. It's a Mexican franchise.
Okay.
So I worked there and worked pretty quickly, came in as like an English trainer, but kind of worked my way up pretty quickly to being the first foreign director there, and saw just how fucked up management can be.
Yeah.
And started to get curious. It's just like, why is it like this? Why do people treat each other this way? How can it be done differently? And that kind of nudged me in the direction of organizational development. So my role after that was working in OD, and enjoyed that. And then as kind of my own personal development, got a coaching certification because I thought it looked interesting. And it just like really nailed me as like, this is my work, like to get to be in conversation with people one-on-one, but also to get into like below surface level stuff was really interesting. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into it. Worked internally as a coach at that company where I was doing organizational development for a while. And then we made the move out here and a lot of things changed. And 4 years ago, I started my own practice.
Yeah. And so how does the whole adventure thing, come into this? Like why do people have to be in nature in your view? Why do people have to be out here and be in nature in order to get the full width, let's say, of this kind of coaching?
Yeah. Well, the first answer for me is they don't have to be.
Okay.
And if they don't want to be, then they're probably not a very good match for me in terms of client profile.
Sure.
But as you and I have been working on together, there's the kind of a core theme for me is that leadership is innately adventurous.
Yeah.
Right. And what that means for me is you're always working in a complex environment. You're never quite sure on what the outcomes are going to be or whether you're going to have the right skills for the things that come up. And all of those things are very true in the outdoors. And so what I love in bringing people out into the outdoors is that the stuff that shows up in their leadership that may be holding them back and may also help them to do really well shows up in the outdoors inevitably. So we provide a challenging environment for them, and then we see their stuff come up, right? Like where are the kind of the habits or the behaviors that hold them back showing up in the outdoor environment, so we can work with that. So like one quick example that comes to mind is one of my clients that came out and tried stand-up paddleboarding for the first time, right? Okay. So they're these big, long paddle boards, and we just took them out on a lake, right? Flat water. And as is typical with me when I do stuff like this with people, no instruction. It's just like, there's a paddleboard, there's a paddle, you got your life jacket on, let's go. Yeah. And he just was like going for it and falling off it and scrambling and just like go, go, go. And after he did that for a few minutes, I was like, how are you doing? Like, where are you at right now? And like even just starting to pay attention to his inner experience slowed him down, got him to a place where it's like, oh yeah, there's actually a way for me to be stable on this and to pay more attention to my surroundings. And this is someone that I'd been supporting already for a while, and it was so familiar, like leaders are high energy, right? And they're all about action and like, let's do this. And I tend to work with a lot of male leaders, so it's also like, I'm going to be good at this. Like, let's make this thing happen. Yeah, for sure. And it just completely changed his experience to start to slow down and see like, oh, I can be stable on this thing if I pay attention to a bit of breath and kind of how I'm feeling and that kind of thing. So that kind of stuff always shows up when leaders come out into this environment. And so, yeah, I find it very useful to the work.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate with that as well, because from my experiences having traveled around and solo traveling, but also traveling sometimes with family and friends, I figure out that oftentimes when I'm on the road is when I experience the most growth internally. Yeah. Right. I get a lot more clarity on my thoughts. I learn a lot more life skills. Yeah. Obviously I get to have fun, right? Because having fun is really good. It's good for health as well. Yeah. And I think the idea of being in a quiet and peaceful environment surrounded by nature also brings you that inner peace that allows you to really think in a way that will be different, say, at least for me, say if I was at my regular cafe back in Bangkok,
Yeah.
right? It's all well and good to be there and be in a quiet space and work or be at a co-working space, but it's very different to just be there versus say, sit by the side of a river, quiet, all you can hear is the stream and the birds and the wind.
Yeah.
So I think nature in that way is quite a powerful vehicle for that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for bringing that piece in, because the disruption part to me is also very important. In just taking someone out of their normal environment is a disruption, and then putting them in a pretty wild environment is more of a disruption, right? And disruption in a way that is, in a way that I can control as the coach, can open up different ways of seeing, different ways of being that aren't available, like when you're in your normal cafe and your normal routine. So that's another really big aspect to it. And Minakami is just really well placed to do that. The type of venues we have to offer, the easy access to Tokyo, the different types and levels of adventure that we can offer here are just super suited to the work.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult though for like certain people who, not necessarily that come here or that work with you, but just in general from what you think and what you see, do you find it difficult for people to be out in nature and sort of disconnect and be able to process those thoughts as they're maybe traveling or doing what they're doing? What do you think?
In my experience, the biggest thing is for people to allow themselves the time to do it. That's the biggest thing, right? Like, do I have enough time to go do this, even for like a day or 2 days or 3 days? So that's probably like the first obstacle to get over. But when people get over that, I find when they get out into this environment, they actually do really well. Like, it's not uncommon. Like one of the kind of the first, what I call invitations, right? I offer a lot of invitations in this work, and I'm intentional about that word because you can refuse an invitation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I like to offer invitations.
That's good.
The first one is, you can give me your phone if you want. Right? And so you can really fully be disconnected while you're here. And most people are like, thank you. Right? They're like, great, I'm happy to be rid of it. So it's like the kind of breaking the barrier of like, can I allow myself this time, even though I may not know exactly what's going to happen. And once they get through that, then actually I think people are quite good and they kind of really get into it. But there is kind of a big initial step to get over first.
Let's talk about our shared love for adventure, perhaps. So where does that come from for you?
Let's see. I need to give a lot of the credit to my dad. My dad was a pretty big adventurer and kind of pulled me into adventure a lot when I was younger. And I didn't do very well with it at the time.
Right.
Like, my memories with him are like crying with a backpack on, like, why do we have to climb this mountain? To getting to like, as soon as I could leave, basically get out of high school and go on to my further education, was like, I want to go. And I think part of that was, when I was 13, we took our first trip overseas as a family. We went to Spain and Portugal, but we also went to Morocco, to the bazaar. There's something about being in that environment that I think, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but it just switched like, holy shit. Because I grew up in like a small New England town in America. Everybody looks the same, kind of that type of thing. So I think there's something that switched in that trip. And then there was just like the independence of being a young adult and like, holy shit, I can really try and do anything. So I think it was just like a combination of those things. And one of the things that you and I discussed while we were here together is like realizing more and more an adventurer. Like, I have this image of like real adventurers never get intimidated or scared of anything, where myself, I'm an adventurer. I'm like, fuck, like this is hard, or this is scary, or like I'm uncomfortable. And knowing that there are more of us out there that actually, that's the kind of the real, what it's actually like to be an adventurer. But that's kind of the point of like, well, I've invited myself to get through this next level of comfort or challenge or whatever it is, and I'm there for it. Yeah,
and you push yourself out of your boundaries, and you push yourself beyond what you think is possible for yourself. And it's actually very funny you bring up this bazaar in Morocco, because even for me, I often use that as an example when I talk about realizations about certain things, because, been to many bazaars around, but the bazaar in Marrakesh especially is just, it's something else. There's certain energy or certain realization about that place and how fast-paced it is and how many stimuli there are that you have to really consider, and it's just all thrown at you all at once, and then you come out of this maze into a big square, and you just start to think like, holy shit. It's not just for those from small towns like you. I feel it too, even though I'm from Bangkok. And it's funny, I use that same example, and touching to your point about like being nervous or being scared or intimidated of adventure, even though you love it. I think that's normal. It's funny because you're like, oh, it's nice to meet other people that are like that. But for me, I'm surprised that there aren't everybody who is like that, because I'm sure there are people who are scared and people who aren't, but it's totally normal, for example, to find yourself in a country and not speak the language, and perhaps, you had a plan that you were going to take XYZ bus to get to this place, but you missed the bus, or the bus broke down along the way. But I see it as a way, and maybe this is mental framing. I don't know if you can talk about that, but I see it as a way to build resilience that, hey, if my bus breaks down along the way, what am I going to do now? How do I figure this out? And it actually makes me a better person in the real world when I'm interacting with those around me, both professionally and personally.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the benefit that comes out of going on adventures comes later, sometimes even much later. Like where you realize like, wow, that was a period where I really grew a lot or made some really important connections or that type of thing. So there's a big difference to like when you're in it and then kind of what comes up later and kind of the like the seeds that were planted during the time and how they start to grow and come to fruition later on.
Yeah. And with your coaching and all of the work that you've been doing over the last 5 or 6 years, is there any kind of story that perhaps stands out for you that, someone came and engaged in, adventure or engaged in some form of coaching and, went out, and something you might want to share with everyone out there?
Sure. Yeah. One recent example, which has just been really cool for me in terms of like what becomes possible in working with people that I hadn't really imagined before I went into this work on my own, is a guy who lives in Tokyo. He's originally from the UK. And he first joined my men's group. I run a men's group for men in Japan, and was just really committed to that work, and then asked to work with me on an individual basis as he was taking on like a new leadership role at his company. And we worked together for about 6 months, and just one of those people that is just really shows up to the work, just really committed, really following through. And also someone who's willing to bring everything into the work. And for me, what that means is oftentimes when we talk about leadership or executive coaching, there can be this image that we're just talking about business all the time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bullshit, because we're humans with whole lives.
Yeah.
And the work that we do at our businesses takes up some aspect of that, and then there's everything else. And so he was someone to really willing to bring in like his personal relationship and kind of choices he wanted to make, and really made some shifts about like his work going extremely well and him really growing as a leader, but also like making some big decisions about how his how his life was going to go, like stuff that with his partner and stuff about where he's going to live next and moves he's going to make. And then he just came out here a couple of weeks ago with his brother from France just to like hang out and go on an adventure. So like we have a friendly relationship as well. So for me, this is like this kind of dream scenario of getting connected through people to work, but also building out longer relationships with people and continuing to get to share this place with them and see like the progress that they've made in their own like leadership and in their lives.
Yeah, that's quite profound, and it's the power of building a relationship and power of just having a one conversation, you never know where that's going to end up, and you never know how far it can go, where it can go, what it can lead to. So yeah, I totally understand. I can totally relate where you're coming from, because I have similar experiences with certain people that I may have met just casually thinking that this was, a nice networking or nice social event, but we ended up, building a much deeper relationship that has rightly or wrongly affected my life in ways that I didn't, expect or imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what would you find is, let's say, difficult about coaching, or what is difficult about working with people for you as someone like that?
Well, first of all, I think I can speak for a lot of coaches out there that one of the most challenging parts is enrolling new clients, right? We love the work of coaching, but when it comes to like putting ourselves out there and creating the new relationships that create the possibility of working together, can find it really challenging to like sell, especially something that, for me, this feels like very heart-based work. It feels like I'm really here for it, and really feels like a purpose for me.
Yeah.
And so to get into conversations about like, and this is how much I charge, and this is my package, and that type of thing, can be really challenging. Beyond that, let's see. Probably getting in relationships, and this can be particularly true in Asia, where clients see me more as like advisor, or in Japan it's sensei, like that type of role, and continually kind of coming back for like, well, what's your advice, or what do you think about it? And it's not that I'll never do that, but that's not where the power of coaching lies, right? The power of coaching lies in people developing their own capacity to show up with solutions that work for them.
Like self-empowerment?
Okay. Yeah. And also the willingness to try stuff that comes from them that may fail. Because that's a really important part of development, right? So I do my best from like early on in the engagement to separate them from that way of thinking of like, that's not what I'm here for. But with some clients, it can take a lot longer, right? Particularly when things get challenging. It's like, can you tell me what you think or what the answer is? As if I have the answers. So that can be challenging. And part of the reason it can be challenging is because it feeds my ego.
Right.
It's like, well, actually, I think I do have an answer here.
Yeah. So you have to hold back perhaps when you do, or?
Yeah. Or I have to be very honest and say, listen, this is something that's coming up for me as a possibility, but it's coming from over here. So you may not want to trust it, or it may not be appropriate. So if it feels right, then maybe I'll have something to offer with that kind of, qualifying. So it's the combination of like the client thinking that's what the work is about, me giving them answers, and my ego meeting that and being like, oh yeah, okay, great. This feels good to have someone think I know more than they do, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that I can find challenging, and it doesn't, the more I do it, I think the better I get at dealing with it, but it's still a dance to be in, for sure.
Yeah. No, I can understand what that means. It's hard to come across as, authentic in a way, but it's very important to do so, even though you're trying to present yourself, and you're trying to sell, perhaps, as you've pointed out. But these days people value the authenticity. They value the real person behind, what the business is, right? Yeah. Fundamentally, regardless of what industry you're in, people want to do business with people, right? It's all about those human relationships, which is why you notice that sometimes people will say that all deals are done on the golf course, or they're done over dinner, or they're done at a bar or something. It's very rarely that you'll actually do it at a boardroom table in an office. It's possible, but not very common, It's because of the person. You need to build that trust with that person. Yeah. And I think that, for those who are not just maybe in coaching, but for those who are offering solopreneurship businesses, freelance businesses, service-oriented businesses, that trust factor and that authenticity today is like at the very top for those who are looking for somebody to work with. And someone to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So with that being said, I want to know what's next for you. What's next for Cory? What's next for the coaching? What do you have planned?
Yeah. Well, the kind of the favorite part of my business is when it gets to contribute to the local community. So the more I get people out to Minakami, the more that happens because I use local venues, local food, local guides, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So for 2025, I'm looking to create even more of that. So both on the individual basis, but on holding some more retreats out here. And then I also have a community-based event, which is really for locals here. It's an event we hold a couple times a year where we bring a local artist and a local chef together and then invite locals to come and experience that, but also to talk about the future of the community.
Okay.
So we did one in July, we're doing another one in December, and we'll continue to roll that out. Because there's a lot of investment happening in this town right now. And I'm not that interested in having the big money guide the direction that the community goes in. I'm more interested in having us work together as a community.
Yeah, of course.
And as a non-Japanese person here, it's not easy to have say, right? So I work with a Japanese partner that does that. And we just invite people into kind of a casual setting without being too hard of like, let's create a vision. It's just like, what's it like to experience time together and to talk more about what the future could look like. So, it's just very community-based. As things seem to kind of continue to go out of control around the world, I'm kind of more and more focused on, well, what's happening locally and where's my kind of sphere of influence and impact that I can have. And I get to do that both with clients. I have clients around the world. I get to do that either by bringing them here, but also then working with the people that live around me here in the community.
Yeah, that's so important. Community-based growth in a small town like this is what is going to give the town its identity and its feeling, right? Yeah. Someone comes in from Osaka or Tokyo and just invests money and has never lived here, never done anything. Yeah. It's a different vibe. I think it'll change the whole vibe of this place. Yeah. Most likely for the worse. But who knows, you know? I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And Before I wrap up, I often ask my guests this. I'll ask you the same question, which is there any mantra or any lesson or quote or way of being perhaps that you want to, impart on some of our audience members today? And any kind of, let's say, parting advice?
Let's see. The way I'll share it is the work that I'm in.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And the work that I'm in is, how can I show up as, you mentioned authenticity earlier, how can I show up as more of myself in the world? Because spending 10 years in corporate Tokyo, basically, and having to kind of wear the clothes and the face and all of that required to be successful in that, moving out to the mountains, being in my own business has been like peeling back those layers so that I can show up more as who I am. And part of that is for my boys, right? Modeling for them that they get to be kind of who they are and the world needs them to be who they are. So I would say that it's that, like, I talk about it a lot as kind of soul expression. What is our true soul expression in the world? Because our world needs exactly that. Right? Like each of us are here to bring our own particular light to the world. And if we don't allow that to shine through, then the world doesn't get all of us. So I'm saying that, as I say, as being in the work, not there yet, but it feels like kind of the most important work to be in right now.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And with that, I think we're going to wrap this up.
Cool. Great.
And thank you guys for checking out this episode. This is Cory.
Yeah.
We're in Japan. We're in Minakami.
Yeah, come visit Minakami. Best place in Japan.
I can concur.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cory. I appreciate that.
Yeah, right on.
All right.